everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah, also known as the Floating Designer. If you have landed on my video somehow, it means that you are researching on how to start a successful brand. Don't worry, I'm here to help you. So I've got a very fun lesson for you today about how to start a successful brand. But before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Alright, let's go! So the first tip that I have for you is for you to build a very strong foundation. A brand isn't just a logo or a product or a service. A brand is what connects you to your business and what makes you human. There are 5 key points that you have to consider in order to build a strong foundation for your brand. The first one is you need to figure out what your purpose is. Why does your brand exist? What is the purpose of your brand? How does your brand improve the quality of people's lives? These are the questions that you need to ask in order to define what your purpose is. When you do find your purpose, it can also help you define what your goals are and essentially help you reach those goals. Number 2, coming up with a really cool name. Now, competition is really high, the internet is really big and very accessible nowadays, so realistically, you have a lot of people to compete with. So, coming up with a really unique name is actually quite key and important. I'll share more about what you need to consider when coming up with names later on. Number 3 is to develop a brand personality. If you think of your brand like a person, then you can think of what kind of personality traits your brand can have. Is your brand quirky, funny, authoritative, a little bit commercial? Number 4, based off of the personality traits, you can come up with a tone of voice. How does your brand communicate its messaging to your target audience? In a quirky way, in a more casual way, or more serious? The last one, creating a brand style. Based off the 4 points that I've mentioned, what kind of style does your brand have? How does it aesthetically and visually present itself to its target audience? So these are the 5 key points on how you can start building a very strong foundation for your brand. Tip number 2. Define your brand. Simon Sinek once said, "People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it." In order for your brand to stand out amongst the crowd, you need to first understand how your brand can connect with your audience in a deeper level. A way for you to figure this out is for you to use the golden circle. Let me explain to you what the golden circle is, and then you can use it as a reference point for building your brand. The golden circle starts with the why, which is the core of your brand. The why is what you always have to go to when you have self-doubt, when you have a lot of questions. Always go back to why. Why does your brand exist? Define your why and further understand what the purpose of your brand is and what your goals are and what your values are. Outside of the why is the how. How do you deliver your why? Is it through online commerce? Is it a physical shop? Is it delivery? Just outside of the how is the what. The what is what exactly your product or your service is. The golden circle actually emphasizes mostly on the why. If you don't have the why, but you only have the how and the what, then nobody is going to be interested in your brand, unfortunately. Start off by defining your why, and then work outwards. Tip number 3. Choose a memorable name. Once again, like I mentioned before, competition is really high, the internet is huge and very accessible, so you have to compete with a lot of people from around the world. But it doesn't mean that you can't come up with a really cool name. These are 4 styles that you can consider when you are trying to think of a name that represents your brand. Number 1 is a descriptive name. This basically just means that you are being really literal with your brand name. For example, Toys R Us, Discovery Channel, MTV. It says what it is, and it is what it is. You can even use your own name. Like, if it was for me, it would be like Sarah YouTube channel, Number 2, suggestive. So this means that your brand name actually hints at what you actually do. So for example, YouTube, Netflix, and Instagram. Number 3, abstract. I mean, this is quite obvious. It's basically an invented word, and it usually expresses a concept or an emotion. So, for example, the biggest thing on the internet, Google or Yahoo. Those aren't actually words, but they have now become words in our society. Number 4, metaphorical. So this means that you borrow a word and then you link it to your product and your service. So for example, Amazon, Apple, Canon. Okay, we're at our last tip, and this is a very important tip, so please take note. Tip number 4 is just to be more human, to communicate on a human level. When you start to build your audience, you need to make sure that you build a very strong connection with them. So please remember this. Number 1, listen to your audience. Once you build an audience, you need to also listen to their opinions and their feedback. If they give you constructive criticism and you eventually implement it to improve your brand, your audience will then feel really heard and very valuable, and that builds an even stronger bond. Number 2, build trust amongst your audience. Transparency is key. So if you have any plans or any changes that you are doing to your brand, make sure you communicate it well to your audience so that they're always in the loop. Number 3, remember to always mention your brand story. Your audience chose you because they related to your brand story. This is also a very good opportunity for you to educate potentially new customers to come and join your loyal base. Number 4, be consistent with your communication. Always communicate with your audience. It takes time and it takes effort, but when you do communicate well with your audience, you will build a following that are mostly advocates of your brand. They are the biggest advertisers for you. They will always talk about you because they love you, they love how transparent you are, they love how much you communicate with them, and they love that you listen to them. And FYI, if you do communicate with your audience quite often on social media platforms, just remember to be human. Don't copy-paste really generic messages all the time and then just blast it all over your platforms. Come up with really authentic, very meaningful messages or comments or replies to your customers and your audience. It's a lot more meaningful when it sounds like it's coming from an actual human and not a robot or not a scheduling tool. All right, let's recap. Tip number 1, build a strong foundation. Remember the 5 key elements: purpose, name, personality, tone of voice, style. Tip number 2, define your brand. Remember that the core of your brand is the why in the golden circle. Why does your brand exist? Always remember to ask yourself these questions when you go about building your brand and also when your brand eventually grows into a very successful business. Number 3, come up with a really cool and memorable name for your brand. Once again, I have to remind you, competition is very high. You have to come up with a name that's really memorable. But don't worry, just remember those 4 styles that you can consider to name your brand: descriptive, suggestive, abstract, and metaphorical. And the last tip, remember to be human and remember to communicate on a human level. Your audience will stay loyal to you if they can relate to you, if you're trustworthy, if you're transparent, and if you listen to them. Alright, that was it for today's lesson. If you're interested, I created a checklist of all the information that I shared with you today, and the link is in the description down below. You can download it, it's a PDF, and then you can print it out and you can use it as a base or a reference point for your start towards a successful journey in creating a new brand. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!